recognizes the ranking member for opening statement. I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement. I yield back.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Distinguished gentlelady from California, Mary Bono. Gentlelady is recognized.
Chair now recognizes the lady from California is recognized.
I'm pleased to introduce Congresswoman Mary Bono, former U.S. Representative for California's Inland Empire and Desert Region from 1998 to 2013.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Welcome to Sagely Speaking. I'm your host, Mary Bono, and I'm so happy you're here. On this podcast, I hope to bring you insightful conversations with a variety of guests from all walks of life, people with stories, wisdom, and perspectives that inspire and inform. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, and if you feel inspired, leave a 5-star rating. It helps us reach more listeners like you. Now let's dive into today's conversation. Hello, and welcome to Sagely Speaking. Yet again, we have another fantastic guest, somebody that I'm really excited to talk to. We've never met in person, and Bart had reached out to me about coming on Sagely Speaking. We jumped at the chance, and so here we are today. Our guest is retired Command Sergeant Major Bart E. Womack. He served the United States Army with distinction for over 29 years as a professional soldier, providing focused leadership and mentorship to all officers and enlisted soldiers with whom he had the privilege to serve. This Airborne Ranger's maturity, expertise, and personal dedication to excellence contributed immensely to the readiness of the armed forces and the security of our great nation. What Bart Womack is here to talk about today, he's going to recount the 2003 attack on the 101st Airborne Division in Kuwait by Sergeant Hassan Akbar, who killed 2 soldiers and wounded 14 others. Akbar, who was found guilty and sentenced to death, claimed he attacked due to mental health issues and religious extremism. Womack, who survived the attack, believes God chose him to share his story and raise awareness about insider threats. Bart, welcome to Sagely Speaking. We're so honored to have you here today. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you as well, Mary. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So let's start with what happened with this attack on the 101st Airborne Division. And I've read a little bit about it. I understand you were just about to turn in for the night, but hadn't yet, but your colleagues had. And what happened from then?
Yeah, so it's March 23rd, about midnight, just turning into the next day there, which was a Sunday local. And I'm watching Tiger Woods play golf. We had a television in there, and I found out how to get golf. And I'm loading ammunition, I'm watching golf, and I'm trying to do bill pay on the computer at the same time. When I hear something kind of come across the floor, it's something kind of gritty. And I thought it was just a tent's flap, because that would happen at night with the wind blowing. And I'm sitting at the end of my table there, and I see these sparks on the floor. So good thing I was at the end of the table. I see those sparks and I think, well, we are in the land of not quite right. And that is a not quite right grenade that's somehow sparking before it explodes. I jump up. My executive officer is on the other side of that table, so he sees exactly what I see at the exact same time. I go to the back of the tent to wake up the commander, who was asleep back there. We had these fluorescent lights that lit up that particular area in the tent, and by the time I get to the back of the tent, it's dark. Like those lights are no longer shining. I get him up and tell him there's a grenade about to go off, and that we need to get out of the tent. Yeah, I said I'm gonna count to 3, and then we're just gonna run to get out of the tent. I counted. We began to run to the front of the tent. As we were running, a grenade exploded inside of the tent, which ended up knocking him back to his area where he slept. Now, I didn't know this at the time. Our plan was to, once we got outside, just kind of to link up, if you will, and figure out what the next step was going to be and all that. I get outside and he's not there. I'm calling for him, but in whispering tones, not to alert the enemy, if you will, of my position. I realize that I do have a weapon, but I don't have ammunition. At the same time, a gunshot goes off, and I realize that it's my executive officer, because it happens right in what's called the vestibule of that tent area. Although I aim my weapon in that direction, I don't have ammo I went to charge the weapon, and when there's no ammo, you pull it back, and it just kind of stops. And I realized there was no just a okay, I'm screwed here. I need a weapon and ammunition. I run inside the TOC, run in there hollering for an ammunition and a weapon and night vision devices because I knew I couldn't see outside. Now, by that time, as I mentioned, the shots fired. My executive officer is shot. There's one grenade that has exploded, and then there's another one that exploded in the tent beside us. By the time I get my weapon and ammunition and come out, another one had exploded and someone else had been shot. So everything's happening very, very quickly. When I come back out, I go to my tent to try to find the commander and executive officer, and they're not there. I go back in the tent and realize that I'm going to need some help because I was the only one outside. And we were able to get some help by making that call on the radio, called my old unit that I belonged to that now is one of our subordinate units, and asked them to send some troops over there to help and search the area for the enemy. At the same time, someone came on the radio to ask about if we needed a medevac, and I knew that at least one person was shot at the time, so I knew we needed a medevac to send it in the vicinity of the TOC. So all those things happen. We are searching for the enemy. Casualties are mounting up. We establish an area to treat them and get them evacuated to the medical aid station that's on our camp there for further evacuation to the combat support hospital. It's probably 4 kilometers or so away, and like a 1-minute ride once they're in the air.
I might interrupt you here, only because I'm following you as if I'm envisioning this in my mind. How much chaos is happening? I know you can train and train and train for these situations, but at this point, do you know what's happening? Does it matter what's happening as far as who the enemy is? Do you suspect an insider threat? Or how much pandemonium is taking place at this point?
While we're moving the casualties, at the same time we're assessing, trying to figure out what's going on, where's the enemy at? And I had checked our guard towers a few times, throughout the time that we were there. It had been about 3 weeks, and they were doing the right things when I was out there. But I was confident on that night someone must have fell asleep. That's the only reason the enemy could have gotten into our camp. Now, the camp's probably 10 football fields big with 12-foot mounds of dirt around it. So they would have to, and you would sink if you tried to come up the mound of dirt. However, someone committed this attack, and we can't find a sign of them. There's no signs of anything. At the time, I'm thinking, if the enemy is this good, they can come here, create this chaos, and we have no sign of them. We're going to get annihilated when we cross that border. The intelligence has lied to us, or either we were looking at the wrong thing. They are much more combat effective than we ever realized. So the search continues. About the same time, a big explosion happens in the sky. So now we're beginning to think it's a coordinated attack. We learned later that it was a British tornado jet returning from a mission, and the Patriot missile shot it down. We don't know that on the ground at that particular time. We finally get the commander into the TOC. He ended up with a flesh wound in his arm from a shrapnel from a grenade, and he immediately says we need to get accountability of our personnel. And it's at that time that we learned that one person is missing, and it's Sergeant Hassan Akbar, as well as ammunition and grenades. Now, our ammunition just came in just that day, earlier that day. So he became our number one suspect. So the search continues for him, albeit most of the people, all of the people really at the brigade headquarters had no idea what he looked like. All we had was a name. So you can imagine this camp of 5,000 people, and everyone's wearing the same thing, the same uniform, and all this chaos is going on. So we're trying to calm people so we don't end up with fratricide of people shooting one another in an attempt to try to identify the enemy. So it's just mass chaos, but we're going around trying to calm our soldiers and not to get trigger happy. We fortunately trained them well to only identify to positively identify what you're shooting at before you shoot it. So he'd have never been shot because he, excuse me, he looked like us. So once we are alerted that he's missing his sword, grenades, and ammunition, he becomes our number one suspect. We continue checking bunkers and really checking on people. Our intelligence also realizes there was one bunker that he hadn't gone to all night. He goes to that bunker, and his approach all night was walking up, identifying who he was, and then asking who was in that bunker. So Akbar doesn't know we're looking for him, and as the major approaches the bunker, he says, Sergeant Akbar's here. And then the major asks who else is in the bunker, and a private identifies himself, and that's when the major took him down because Akbar didn't know we're looking for him. So I always think that something turns people on to do these attacks, and then something turns them off.
What do you mean by that?
Well, whatever led them to do it in the first place, there's something in them that allows them to do it, but it's never as bad as it could have been. Now, from even a basic training tactical standpoint, Mary, we teach soldiers in basic training that you throw a grenade into a hole, and then you take your weapon, and then you finish the would-be enemy off with small arms fire. He threw grenades into tents and never did that, or things would have been much worse. Not to mention with the chaos of people running throughout the camp, of just being anywhere on that camp for the most part in that particular area, and just laying in the prone position and just kind of hitting anything that moved. So something turns him on, something turns him off. I mean, he didn't even do anything to the person in the bunker that he was with. And that was the second bunker that he had gone into, and there were fellow soldiers in there after he had launched the attack and didn't do anything to them.
Bart, was he deliberately targeting your tent and you, or just bad luck?
No, deliberately, although he didn't say it was deliberate, but it was the mindset of take out the headquarters, and the body will follow. Just degrade the whole motivation and attitude of every soldier in our command by taking out his headquarters would demoralize everyone else. And it almost worked, even though, 2 killed and 14 wounded. The next day, I mean, heads were down. I'm like, we can't do this. we have to get up, get moving. And in the area where it happened, it's daylight and everything now. I made troops get out of that area because they were just sitting around with their heads down. I'm like, the war hadn't even started yet. I know that you need to process this in your own way, that you need to grieve in your own way. I get it, but go someplace else. You're not going to do it here. So, but it had already set in that, take out the head, the body will follow it. It had already set in. I'm thinking, the war hadn't started yet. This wasn't supposed to happen. So we got to get ourselves together, because when we cross over that border, we have, I don't want to say an easier enemy, but we do have one that we can at least recognize and identify. So it's going to be different. So we have to get ready for that. Now, what we didn't know, Mary, was that he had planned this all along. It wasn't that it was going to happen on this day at a certain time or when we get the ammunition, but even before he joined the military, he had become radicalized. So he was an Islamic extremist, and he had written things in his diary like anti-American things, that is my goal to destroy America. It was my goal as a child, as an adolescent, and while in college, destroying America is my greatest goal. A man should only see himself as only being loyal to Islam. That's their greatest goal, is to be that. These are things that he had written even before he joined the military. And on the eve of deploying, around January, February, he had written that I'm not going to do anything here, meaning Fort Campbell, but when I get over there, I'm going to try to kill as many of them as I can. So I still remain that there was some sign. Now, the sign wasn't going to be when ammunition comes, this is what I'm going to do. But what was it? What did we miss? Now, realize that I'm at this level up here at the headquarters, and he's down in, a different level of the command. But even our leaders around him, I still think that there was something that could have been missed. Even if it's just isolating yourself, when you're not doing everything that everyone else is doing, playing in reindeer games, if you will, not training stuff. I just mean, let's say they want to play football, or they want to do this activity or that activity, and he's not doing it. He's just off by himself. That, to me, that begged a question. What's wrong? Why aren't you playing? Come anyway. It could have been an issue where there was something happening at home with his family, someone sick or anything, or just jitters of going to war, anything. But was that question even asked? So that's something that kind of sticks with me today, which kind of took me down this path of, one, making sure people knew about the story. And that was the reason for writing the book. I wanted them to know that someone can join the military and carry out one of these attacks, that insider threat is closer than you think.
And your book, really fast, your book is called
Yes.
Embedded Enemy.
Yes.
And it's available everywhere. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to point out this important fact.
Yeah,
so
thank you very much. Yeah, and what I learned and beginning to tell that story was immediately that regardless of who it is, we don't go home with them at night. So we don't know what they're thinking, what they're planning. We don't know. We know what they bring to work every day. That's all we know. We know what they show us. We don't go home with them at night. And the other thing was because someone who took the same oath as I did, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that it didn't matter who it was. So I came up with a quote that says, "No profession, level of education, ideology, or religion is above reproach. There is no profile. The insider threat is closer than you think." We far too often kind of channel ourselves in what an attacker that would want to attempt to pull us off, looks like, background, all these different things. And I do not believe that there is a profile.
Yeah, there have been a few over the past 20 years. And I think we always go to religious extremism. And it's been a tricky time for over 20 years, since 9/11 for sure, and an all-volunteer army. But this very possibility of the insider threat is bone-chilling. It always is bone-chilling. And I remember the shooting not too long ago in the Navy Yard. The threat, we hear now something's happening, shots have been fired, and immediately we make assumptions. But your desire is to make sure that we're aware of these insider threats, what we can do to prevent them, lessen them. So what are you thinking? What are you telling leaders now that they ought to do to preempt this or to contain it?
In writing the book, it wasn't just to tell the story. That was part of it. But the other part was by that time I understood that these attacks keep happening. And I would begin to watch them. And I used what those things were in other attacks as the hook for the book. And I came up with proactive strategies to mitigate it. I watched the attacks and okay, the same thing keeps happening, but no one's paying attention to these lessons. So I'm going to combine the lessons learned from the embedded enemy attack also with what's happening in these attacks of today's time of school and mass shooting attacks and insider threat attacks, and how our world is a copycat world. So 6 years later at Fort Hood, Texas, Hassan Akbar, a major, pretty much did the same thing on U.S. soil. They're killing 13 and wounding 32, and his was the same premise, same ideology. So pretty much a copycat, arguably inspired and motivated by Hassan Akbar. I mean, he did it, got away with it, same ideology. I'm going to do the same thing. Some people who worked with him at the Pentagon overheard him saying, this is before he went to Fort Hood, that he applauded the attacks on 9/11. Now, this is a United States Army officer applauding those attacks. So that was the first sign that was missed. I mean, that's something terribly wrong,
Right.
happening right after that. And he's working at Walter Reed. And of course, we know where all those attacks took place, but one of them was at the Pentagon. So right in the same city, but they didn't connect the dots to think that something was wrong, and more importantly, to report it. So my strategies, proactive strategies, one is trust no one, followed by observe, listen, report, know your neighbor, listen, don't just hear, gut check, and then signs. And arguably all those are kind of signs, but I'll break them down. So to trust no one, I say that to audiences, whether it be corporate organizations or academic institutions, places of worship, I put out there to trust no one. First and foremost, again, I served with a guy that took the same oath as I did, and then he literally killed 2 people, shot one point blank in the back, and wounded many others. So my trust was out the window. You have to show me a lot, and you have to be close. If I allow you to get that close, it becomes very, very difficult as far as Bart Womack is concerned. But when I say trust no one, I know it's going to jog everyone's memory to think about how do they trust. And that's what I want them to do. I want them to think about how they trust. Some people will say, well, I trust them until they give me a reason not to. I don't advocate for that, but however they do it is however they do it. But I do want them to think about how they trust. And I know we thank our service members for their service. We get that one a lot out there, and we appreciate it. I do not want them to form an opinion that just because someone wears this uniform that they are, you have to be careful in what regard they hold them. I know that's a tricky statement, but I just told you 2 stories where those people wore uniform. We don't go home with them at night, so we don't know.
A quick question, and I hope I don't make you lose your train of thought here. And
No.
my dad was a B-17 waist gunner in World War II, flew 22 combat missions over Germany. But how do you say trust nobody in a job like the military where you have to trust the people you're in that foxhole with? That's where the whole saying, I wouldn't want to be in a foxhole with them. So how do you reconcile those two? Trust nobody, but you live, work, breathe, live and die in a system where you have to trust the people around you. So how do you reconcile that? Just time or?
Yeah, it's going to be time. It's going to be actions. You're going to be you should be paying a lot of attention to them, because there's some people that in that foxhole that if you had a choice to be in a foxhole with someone that you would pick them versus, someone saying it has to be that person. Wait a minute, does it have to be that person? Because he, she, this, and I don't trust them because of those 5 things I just named. I'd rather be with Jones versus Williams. So even in that context alone, people are already evaluating trust for a certain individual. So, how do you do it? It's watching them all the time. Are they living up to those standards? Are they living up to the values and all those things? Because just because we wear the same uniform and we have Army values, they're not the same values that I grew up with versus that person that I may be in a foxhole with. And at some point, I'm gonna get them talking enough to be able to share what those things are. Do you value what I value? And how do you value it? I'm going to understand where they came from and all those different things to evaluate that trust.
Fascinating. Okay, keep going.
What year? 2009. I'm sorry. Yeah, 2009, 2010. A Colonel Russell Williams of the Canadian Royal Air Force had been entrusted to, he was a pilot. He had been entrusted to even fly Queen Elizabeth II to Canada. So he was highly regarded, highly trusted. Later on, committed, killed 2 women. He was charged with that as well as 2 sexual assaults against women. He was breaking into women's houses, of which he did, breaking and entering, charged for that 80 different times. He would try on their underclothes and all these things. He was the commander of the base, and that's what he turned out to be. Again, we don't go home with him at night. So that's another one of those trust things where we have to really look at, what the heck's going on with him. And in February 2019, a Coast Guard officer plotted to kill politicians. He had a hit list of politicians. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Representative Andrea Ocasio-Cortez, Maxine Waters, Senator Blumenthal. And he also looked up to see if senators and Supreme Court justices had Secret Service, because he had some of those on his hit list as well. But serving right there in the Navy Yard, he had served also in the Marine Corps prior and 2 years in the Army National Guard. And how did he end up getting caught? Well, he was doing the research for all this stuff on his work computer. So we just don't know. And that's why I go back to that quote, that no profession, level of education, ideology, or religion is above reproach. There is no profile. That insider threat is closer than we think.
We'll continue with our interview in a moment, but first I'd like to thank my sponsors. Lucy Pet Foods is the leader in gut health. Their formulas for life feature prebiotic, balanced fiber that nourishes your dog and cat's total health. Every purchase helps support the Lucy Pet Foundation, a 501c3 charity helping animals. Save 15% off your first order and use the promo code SAGELYSPEAKING, all one word, and you will get free shipping at lucypetfoods.com. If you're committed to tackling the opioid and addiction crises, then you need to be at the 2025 RX Summit. Use code SAGELY, that's SAGELY, for an extra $100 off. Join top experts and professionals as we share strategies for prevention, deflection, treatment, and recovery. Don't miss this chance to be part of the change. Head over to rx-summit.com to register now. That's rx-summit.com for an additional $100 off.
The mom of two amazing kids, I know how important it is to keep our children safe. And that's why I talk to them about the dangers of drugs. It is not always an easy conversation, but it's essential. By talking openly, we can help our kids understand the risks, which will help them make smart choices. Create a safe place for our kids to ask questions and share their feelings. Together, we can empower them to just say no. Start the conversation today. Your kids' future depends on it. The greatest gift is a conversation.
And now, back to our interview. I'd like to go back to that night, though. Talk about you. Since then, you believe that God spared you to share the story. That's a pretty profound response to something. I would assume there's a long-lasting, fears, and I don't want to diagnose you with PTSD in any respect, but I can imagine, and I just want to thank you for your service at this point in this conversation, because it is really striking my heart what you endured and lived through and led through, clearly by how you motivated the troops immediately thereafter. So I just want to thank you for that very much. But did that change your life forever, that moment? For some reason, I'm always fascinated by stories in people's lives where we have a defining moment, a choice, something happens, there's a catalyst that changes the direction of our lives forever. I'm fascinated by that because I enjoy stories of resiliency and creativity and entrepreneurialism and whatever it might be. Would you say for you, besides, the Army, you stayed in the Army for another couple of decades, I believe, correct?
It was, so that was 2003, so I retired 2006, so another 3 years.
3 years, excuse me. But I can only imagine. And I know that your Embedded Enemy book, that you are promising to make it into a movie, and I want to know how that's going.
I'll go back to that night, and how it affected me or changed me. I would say that the training that we went through was never to prepare you for that night of one of your own. And especially in the very beginning of looking for the enemy and finding absolutely nothing. The two interpreters that came in late in the night prior. So when I learned of that, so something had to have changed in this camp. We've been here for 20 nights and like there's been no sign of this. So something changed. And I was told the two interpreters came in. So it has to be them. Go find them. Of course, we find them and we learned that they have nothing to do with it. But trying to search for an enemy and having no clues is kind of difficult. I say that we weren't necessarily trained for that. But there was this calm over me all night and kind of anticipating what the next step would be, and then the next step would be, and then the next step, and trying to find this person, and especially once we figured out that it could possibly be one of our own. It's like, okay, now how do we calm our soldiers? Like, how do we even tell them that it's one of our own, and they're likely wearing exactly what we have on, but how are we going to find that person? There's 5,000 people in this camp, Mary.
Wow.
So everybody looks the same, especially in the dark with one or two lights on. Everybody kind of looks the same with their helmet on and all that. But I thought the best way to tell them was just tell them straight up. And when I told my first sergeant, he said, you got to be kidding me. It's like, no, I'm not kidding you. So you figure out how you're going to tell, the soldiers that you encounter. You figure out how you're going to tell them. That's the information. You figure out how you're going to tell them. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. And that's the message that went out. And I keep going back to our training of only positively identifying what you see before you shoot as the blessing of no fratricide. Because all it would have taken is someone to think that they saw an insurgent or whomever, and one shot would have led to many. So I guess from a training standpoint, that even though it wasn't necessarily in that exact scenario, that it had taken effect in terms of just being calm as the leader. I never thought about being the leader or not. I mean, I already knew that I was, but it was just, again, what the next thing should be. And then the next thing, the safety of our soldiers, the evacuation of our wounded. And a lot of people played a huge role in this. I mean, I could name some of the names. They did a phenomenal job, and it just instantaneous that they took charge of their particular area and what they thought was the right thing to do. We even had a reporter with us, but he had served in the exact same unit when he was a younger guy as a captain. I believe he got out as a captain, and then he spent some time in the National Guard, but now he's working for, I think, not the New York Times, but I forget who he had worked for at the time when he was on assignment there as an embedded media. And next thing you know, he has a weapon in his hand. I'm like, where do you get his weapon from? But he turned into soldier and doing what he knew to do. I won't say best because he's a good a reporter as well. But he just took over with his innate instincts, and he was like he definitely was another leader on the ground.
Well, back to the movie that you're going to produce. I sure hope that comes to be. I know it's not an easy path to get that done, but I think it would be an exciting movie and enlightening, instructive. So I want to wish you well with that. But I want to just read a little bit about you, and forgive you, my listeners and viewers, for when I read, but this is worth it. Okay, let me read about Bart. He's a combat Iraq War veteran, obviously, 2 Bronze Stars, 1 for Valor. Other awards and decorations include the Legion of Merit, the Drill Sergeant Identification Badge, the Tomb Guard Identification Badge, the Army Ranger Tab, and the Combat Infantryman Badge with a star. And he culminated his career with dual roles as Commandant of the 101st Airborne Division NCO Academy and as the 101st Airborne Division Command Sergeant Major. And excuse me for reading that, and I have my contacts in, which makes it that much harder. So I butchered it a little bit. But the reason I wanted to go there is because you're no simple human. You're highly decorated. What an amazing person, a very courageous person, a dedicated, loyal person. But I wanted to pivot a little bit, if I might, to what exactly you did as a tomb guard. I think people are fascinated by this. Do you mind pivoting to this part of your life a little bit? I like to bring positive, uplifting, if it is, stories into the mix.
Yes. So I was assigned to the Old Guard in 1985. I had only seen what they do one time prior. And I was coming from Korea. When I was stationed in Korea, a buddy of mine had told me about it and talked me into going there. I didn't know anything about the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier aside from seeing it, and how they had 3 reliefs, and the reliefs are formed by height. So I'm 5'10", so that was the 3rd relief. Second relief is like 6'2" and above, and then 6'2" to 6'4", and then 6'4" and above, 6'5" is the 1st relief. So guys, pretty tall. And because my rank as a staff sergeant at the time, I only had one job, and that was to be the relief commander. So the relief commander at 3rd relief was leaving, so they opened up auditions, if you will, for that, and that's how everything began. It was me and another guy, and then he quit, so I was the only guy left, but I still had to go through all the training, of course. So you learn very quickly the cemetery. You learn that the tomb guards themselves are really, aside from the historian that's assigned to an unknown soldier, you're the walking, breathing historian of all things Arlington National Cemetery. Because the gate guard, we call them, that's outside the chains, if you will, all they know is that part of their job. They may know where a few people are buried, but we know a whole bunch of people are buried and the history behind them. So that became fascinating. I didn't know I was going to be a history guy. Wouldn't necessarily say that I am now, but I am of Arlington National Cemetery as a result of working there. So it hits you very quickly what the prestige and the honor and why you're there, what you're serving, more importantly, what you represent. I mean, it hits you very, very quickly. And you are out there in front of the public. You train routinely all the time not to make even the finger snap of a mistake, and if someone's watching, at least one of us are watching, then we know that a mistake was made, even if it's a heel click, if it's anything. You might learn to mask it a little bit the longer that you're there, but it is, I tell people, it is the best duty that I had while I was in the Army. A guy taught me how to do the walking, that trained me, the same friend who asked me to come there in the first place. And he made me the best that I could be. And I tried to pass that same thing on to others. So I went to what we call back on the line while I was a platoon sergeant. Then I was able to come back down to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier to be the sergeant of the guard, which is the guy that's in charge of it all. But when I was there before, I taught myself how to walk. So my job before was only to, as relief commander, you're the guy that's doing the inspection of the weapon, and all that. You don't walk because of my rank. But I said, I'm going to teach myself how to walk, because what I learned, I tried to make a correction on one of my guys. And then he said, well, Sergeant, you don't know because you don't walk. I was like, that's a good point. I'm going to fix that. As leaders, you're supposed to lead by example, right? But I had not done that. So in the regular infantry, I'm going to be a Joe, and then I'm going to be a team leader, and then I'm going to be a squad leader, and then I'm going to be a platoon sergeant. So you can say that I served in every position that you have served. So when I tell you, I'm telling you from experience of having done it. And I had not done that. So I said, okay, you're right. I didn't tell him that he was right because he's just trying to be a smart butt. Okay, but I fixed it by, I'm going to teach myself how to walk. So that's what I did. And then, of course, I never got that comment again because I taught myself how to walk. So I would often do that when I was the sergeant of the guard as well. And this for the audience, the sergeant of the guard is the guy that you see on Memorial Day and Veterans Day with the wreath out there with the president or the vice president or the representative. So
What an
definitely
honor.
the best duty and the best honor. Thank you.
Yeah, I spent 25 years on and off, part-time, full-time in Washington, D.C. And of all the sites, of course, Arlington National Cemetery is one of the most hallowed, sacred, moving sites, grounds, if you will. And there are a lot. And I used to say the minute you lose that tingling, spine-tingling feeling when you pull up to any of, let's say, the Capitol building or see the Lincoln Memorial or any of these things, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, when you lose that feeling, then it's time to leave that town. I've never lost that feeling. And it's amazing how something like, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier can just captivate and be everything patriotic and everything this country stands for. And I think people seek it out because they want to feel those feelings. And the fact that you were a part of that, that's pretty cool. You've had a pretty cool life, Bart.
It's definitely pretty cool. I don't go back there often, and I definitely don't go down there when I'm in DC, routinely. But the times that I do go, I could probably count the times that I've been back since I left. But the times that I do go, I get to take it all in before they change the guard. Because unfortunately, while they're changing the guard, I'm evaluating how good, bad, right, or wrong they are versus my time.
Always a critic, huh?
It was harder when I was there. That's where you kind of look at all those things. Ranger school, all of it. Oh, it was harder when I was there. So
that's our age.
I get to take it in before they change the guard. So when the guys walking back, I get to take it all in because the view is breathtaking because you see all of DC, and then you're reminded of why you're there and why you're watching that. And even though I don't focus on the guard, you can't help but hear the clicking of his heels, the weapon going back and forth while you just stare at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier itself. So it will always give you, goosebumps. Yeah. Even walking around the amphitheater and coming close to it will always take me back to my time there.
There's one more topic before I lose you today that I did want to bring up. We talked briefly yesterday over the phone about the Purple Heart and how the victims and those who were killed in the attack that you survived have not received a Purple Heart. Can you tell us about that and how might people help to see these? Yeah.
Yes. Based on Akbar's reason for committing this attack, that's detailed. Those victims, my soldiers, deserve the Purple Heart Medal. I mean, it's unequivocal. And they've been denied this. So I took over this effort for them to receive the medal back in 2021. Up until that point, I was just under belief that someone had tried and they were denied. But in asking everyone, I couldn't get a name who had tried. So I said, okay, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to do it. That way I'll know where it stands. I'll be able to pass it on to other people about the status of everything. And I knew that. So by this time, the regulation that had been updated to accommodate the Fort Hood attack, and only for that, where it says the attacker must have been in communication with a foreign terrorist organization, and that communication inspired and motivated the attacker to commit the attack. So Hassan Akbar was in communication with a foreign terrorist organization. Now, communication means that you reach out to the internet to say, I'm here, I want to do this thing, whatever. And they say, yeah, brother, go do it. And now that's communication. So that was put in the regulation just to accommodate those victims receiving the Purple Heart, which I'm all for, because they should have gotten it immediately, in my opinion, as well. But now that becomes the obstacle for my guys, as if the military isn't looking from 2014 beyond for whatever reason. So there's a lot of black and white ink that's being adhered to, but there's absolutely no common sense being adhered to. So if all those things that he has in his diary, and I'm gonna post this on LinkedIn. I'm gonna start with all those things, and I'm gonna ask whoever my followers are, am I an enemy of our country? Am I a terrorist? All of the above, or none of the above? If arguably Osama bin Laden or anyone who runs a terrorist organization had said the things that Akbar said, everyone would call him a terrorist. So the military to this day has not called that attack a terrorist attack. I am, because that's the word I want to resonate, because that's what it is. It's not even a belief. That's what it is. I don't want others to look at it in that same light. But either he's a terrorist, an enemy of our country. I don't care if they call it friendly fire. The unfortunate incident of the end of the life of Pat Tillman, he received the Purple Heart Medal. So I say to the military, you make a choice. I mean, you did that once. So is it friendly fire? Is it an enemy of our country? Is it a terrorist attack? But call it something. This whole let me hide in the octagon and not call it nothing is not going to fly. So we just have to keep working, to bring that out. So how can people help? I mean, if you agree that that's the case, it's really the congressmen, and I've reached out to three of them, which is in the beginning was Congressman Bacon out of Nebraska, who led the effort and sent a letter. The Secretary of the Army's approving authority. So the letter went to then Secretary Womack, which I don't think got to her. But, it got a response back, which is what I told you about that communication thing. Then Representative Green out of Tennessee, and lastly, Representative DeLuzio out of Pennsylvania. I tried to get them to follow the playbook, if you will, that happened for Fort Hood. So that attack happened in 2009. They weren't awarded the Purple Heart until 2016. The regulation was changed in 2015. But that was at the effort of what they call a delegation, which ended up being 6 politicians out of Texas that made that happen. So as we all know, there's always strength in numbers. If I can get them to do the strength in numbers thing. So I would say for your listeners, tell your senator, your congressman of this, then we have to work together. That no one's going to deny it if they work together. If you have all these people together saying that's what they believe, based on the facts, then it will be approved.
Well, Bart, we are going to do what we can to help spread the word. We're going to do what we can to help with the Congress or with the administration. Another thing I learned in my 15 years in the House of Representatives, it's not a brilliant saying, but it's a truth that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So you just need to be persistent and stay at it. There is a new administration, so maybe there will be a new opportunity. And in 4 years, there will be another administration. And if you have to do it then, you might have to do it then. But right. It's staying at it. And we are happy to help you do that. The Sagely Speaking family is happy to do all we can to help. And I want to thank you for your service and for your leadership and your humanity. I think you're an extraordinary person, and you're quick to laugh. You're a very serious person, but you've got a fantastic smile and laugh when we can get it out of you. It's hard with very serious topics like this to sometimes see who people are, but we do our best. And I just want to thank you for reaching out, and we will follow up on helping in any way that we can with your goal. And we're going to look forward to this is the deal, Bart. We will help you in exchange for an invitation to the premiere of your movie, Embedded Enemy. How's that?
You got it. I will never forget. And thank you so much for your assistance.
Well, God bless you, sir. And thank you for joining us on Sagely Speaking. It was a privilege to have you. We're honored, and we hope our paths cross again very soon. To our listeners and our viewers, thank you for being here. Another extraordinary story, another extraordinary person with a great story to tell, and probably a call to action if you can help. To our sponsors, thank you for helping us out. We couldn't do what we do without you. A special shout out today to my intern, Kate, to my producer, Kim, and to our engineer, Damian, sort of the unsung heroes of our team, but I want to thank you especially today. And so until we meet again on another episode of Sagely Speaking, be well.